Hey, Hammy here, coming to you with the first video from Chapter 6, in which we will look at metabolism, basically the flow of energy through living things, and a big part of the chapter on enzymes. The next slide here, you can see a brief outline of the chapter. This first video will be a little bit shorter. We'll talk about cells and the flow of energy through cells, ecosystems. Second section of the chapter, we'll look at metabolic reactions, endothermic, exothermic. Section 3 is the biggie on enzymes and how they work and things that affect them. And section 4 is a smaller section. We will look at redox reactions. Okay, section 1 is keyed in on this part right here. And if you remember back to Bio 2, the beginning of Bio 2 last year, we have in chapter 35, we have a big discussion about energy and ecosystems. Remember, energy is the ability to do work or bring about change. A lot of times we refer to energy, and we can go through and list all the kinds of energy like heat, light, thermal, kinetic, potential. These two biggies here that we often refer to, kinetic energy and potential energy, would be listed under mechanical energy. Okay, and kinetic energy, we've learned since we were young, is the energy of motion. Something is in motion, something that is moving, like water going over a waterfall, or a car that's put in motion, or a body as you're running. Okay, that is kinetic energy. Again, considered a type of mechanical energy. Potential energy is stored energy. This waterfall, before the water goes down the waterfall, it is potential energy, right? It's up high, and it has kind of that potential for gravity to pull down on it, maybe spin that grind mill in the windmill or in the where the water wheel spins. So it's stored energy. A big one in living things, is chemical energy. Okay, the food we eat, the food that plants make, the sugars and so forth that plants make, is storing up sunlight energy into the food, into the bonds of those carbohydrates, of those glucoses and starches. Okay, so that is considered chemical energy, which is a form of potential energy. Again, you learned this in Bio 2, that in ecosystems, energy will flow. Okay, we learned about the biogeochemical cycles like the carbon cycle and the phosphorus cycle, about how it's stored away and then it's released to producers, and then it's in the living tissues, and then it gets put back into the soil or the air. Okay, and chemicals will cycle through the living and non-living parts of an ecosystem. Energy, however, will flow. So we're starting here with solar energy from the sun, which is picked up oftentimes through photosynthesis by the producers. Okay, and stored, that energy is stored in sugars, which is then eaten by the consumer. And we learned lots of different names for this, right? Primary consumer, if you're eating the plants, herbivore or omnivore, if you're happening to eat a plant at that moment. And then it's used for processes within that moose, within that plant, and all along the way, and it flows right through the living things of the ecosystem. Now notice there are these offshoots, okay, these little starbursts here. Okay, remember, at each level we are losing energy as heat, and we'll discuss that here in a second. First, a quick review of the 2 laws of thermodynamics. Okay, the first law is the conservation of energy. Okay, meaning energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can change from one form to another. And this is key for living things, right? Because all of that energy is being input by the sun. Okay, but we can't use solar energy, right? We're not solar powered. We need plants to have their leaves do photosynthesis and then change this energy into a carbohydrate, into a type of potential energy, which then can be used by us. Okay, now along with that first law comes the second law, the law of entropy. Okay, randomness. Okay, disorder. Okay, when energy is changed from one form to another, there is a loss of energy that is available to do work, or sometimes you say there's a loss of usable energy. Okay, no process requiring conversion of energy. Anytime energy changes forms, it's never 100%. Okay, we can do things to try to make it closer. Okay, instead of using gasoline engines, we can use electric engines, right? Our hybrid vehicles are much more efficient. Instead of the old incandescent bulbs or the CFL or fluorescent bulbs, okay, nowadays a lot of us buy LED bulbs. Okay, and those LED diodes are much more efficient. They give off a lot less heat, and more of the energy is actually going into making the light and not heat. Okay, so that not useful energy that's often gotten rid of is usually heat. Again, just another graphic showing this where we're taking sunlight, okay, input from sunlight. CO2 is the carbon source. We'll learn later water provides the high energy electrons that get dumped into the carbon dioxides to make a carbon-based carbohydrate, C6H12O6. And so the energy is stored in there. And a lot of that heat is lost. Okay, second law of thermodynamics. You're going from solar energy to chemical or potential energy. So some energy is lost. But we now have energy stored in a form that things that can't use the sun can now use that energy. Again, another example, now that we have our chemical energy, okay, in the form of a carbohydrate, okay, we eat the plant, we get the carbohydrate, we get the energy and the sugars, okay, and then we might use it for a muscle contraction. When the carbohydrate is broken apart, okay, and oftentimes remember it's released in cellular respiration in the form of ATP. That ATP, okay, helped the little bridge boys slide past each other. And our muscle contracts, which helps us sometimes, that would now be a form of kinetic energy. Okay, so we're changing forms. A lot of it is lost as heat. Okay, this idea of entropy, okay, or randomness. Okay, if you look at glucose, look how highly organized and structured that is. Okay, more organized, a lot more potential energy, but it is less stable. Okay, things in our universe tend to go towards randomness. Okay, if you think about the simple process of diffusion, okay, where you have a whole bunch of ions on one side of a membrane, okay, that is order. They don't like that. It's not stable. So when this channel protein opens up, guess what happens? We say things move from a high concentration, okay, move from a high concentration to a low concentration. Okay, so the ions will move out of the cell. Now look, they're more scattered. We say they are more random. Okay, that's more stable, okay, because it's more random. They're randomly spread out. Okay, so that's why diffusion works as well. A couple key points with the second law and entropy. Every process in the cells, just like when we talked about cars or lights, nothing is 100%. So every time something is transformed or it changes in forms of energy, we lose some of that energy. Less energy is available to do useful work. Okay, glucose is broken into carbon dioxide and water, and in doing so, it's more random. So glucose is more organized and less stable, whereas carbon dioxide and water are lower energy and more stable. Okay, I often compare it. Think of your room at home, where it just tends to get messy. I know mine does. You get some pile of dirty clothes, laundry that maybe wasn't put away, stuff laying out, maybe a gym bag here or there. And stuff lays around. What do you need to do to keep your room neat and organized, very orderly? You need to put in energy, right? Your parents say, pick up your room. Okay, it's a mess. It's a train wreck in there. Okay, you have to input energy in order to keep it organized. Same thing on my desk at school. I can just get explode with things. I have to take time and energy to file papers away, to clean up messes, to put up little lab supplies here or there from preparing a lab. I have to put in energy in order to keep it very neat. Okay. On Earth, this constant input is from the sun. Okay. And then they use that to create organized molecules. And then we can, which is then a form of potential energy, and we can slowly break those down over time. So without that constant input of the sun, life on Earth here would start to fall apart.